But you don't know if someone's lonely, because if they're in isolation, you might not even have proximity to them. They might not put themselves in those situations, but it's just as devastating to their life and health, their wellness. And
Yeah.
I think that's tragic in so many ways, because it can go unseen, and it does.
It does. So now in all their wisdom, the U.S. Surgeon General, they go, okay, so here's 40 pages on what we
Yeah.
could do about it. Here's pillar 6.
Yeah, right.
Cultivate a culture of connection. It says a culture of connection is vital to creating the changes needed in our society. While formal programs and policies can be, in fact, impactful, the informal practices of, here it is, I didn't make it up, everyday life significantly influences social connection. And it goes on and on and on. And then it gets into a big list of what community-based organizations can do.
Welcome to the Everyday Disciple podcast, where you'll learn how to live with greater intentionality and an integrated faith that naturally fits into every area of life. In other words, discipleship as a lifestyle. This is the stuff your parents, pastors, and seminary professors probably forgot to tell you. And now, here's your host, Caesar Kalinowski.
Hey, I hope you guys are good today. I'm excited about this episode. I got a returning guest. I'll tell you about him in just a minute. You're going to love today's conversation. Very, very cool. First, let me read a review that came in. This review came in from Tim C. in Tennessee. I know who this is. And he says, thank you, Caesar. Thank you for your heart and hard work producing the podcast. I know it takes a lot more work than we listeners realize. Your teaching is always insightful, practical, and immediately useful. Wow, awesome. You and Tina are dear family, and it's a privilege to be on mission with you. I know thousands of listeners feel the same way. Wow. Really appreciate that. I really do. That was a review that came in from iTunes or Apple Podcasts or whatever they call it these days. And when you leave those kind of things and you leave some stars, he left 5 stars. Thanks again, Tim C. It really helps other people find podcasts that they're interested in. So thanks for doing that. Would you do that if you've been a long-time listener and have never left a review? Would you do that wherever you listen to your podcast? I also want to invite you to join us over on Facebook at our Facebook group. Just go to everydaydisciple.com/Facebook. Or when you're tooling around Facebook, you can just search up Everyday Disciple Podcast and it'll come on in. Hope you'll do that. And we can talk about shows, episodes of the podcast. We can talk about mission, of course, anything to do with disciple making, gospel fluency, all that stuff. So hope you'll join us there. Alrighty, let me get right into it because my buddy Gino Curcuruto is back on today. You've heard him on the show a few times. Gino and his family are I guess church planners, I'm going to say, really, they're missionaries. They're a family of missionary servants, as we would say, living in Philadelphia. And they've started many communities on mission, making disciples in their neighborhoods and all that. And they have something really cool that we've talked about that we'll talk a little bit about again today called Brunch Church. It's a very, very cool thing. And so let me just welcome Gino to the show. He's one of my best pals over many, many years. Hey, Gino, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. It is wonderful to be back on. It's good to have a conversation with you again, C. I'm looking forward to this.
Always love it. Just as before we sort of started recording, we were catching up a little bit, and we talked about the fact that it's been almost a year since you and the whole family were here visiting Team K.
Yes.
And we had primo weather, and it was awesome.
Yeah, we are not having primo weather this year in Philadelphia or the Northeast. It's way hotter. So, yeah, I miss that weather and miss you guys.
Global warming, look out. Global warming hasn't hit us, brother, not yet.
Okay, well, you guys are safe then.
Not on the left coast here. So anyway, hey, so the other day we were having a conversation and you mentioned a really cool thing that had started to kind of pique your interest and a conversation that you were having in one of the neighborhoods there in Philadelphia where you guys live and work and make disciples and all that. And it kind of started to lean into this topic of loneliness in our country, and that there's kind of like an epidemic of loneliness and isolation. And amidst all the violence, political divisions, and polarization, people are at a really unhealthy level of loneliness. And tell me a little bit about that and how you kind of got into that conversation yourself there locally.
Yeah, I was with a bunch of artists, nonprofit leaders, business leaders in a local meeting at a co-working space that just opened up in my neighborhood, which was kind of a big thing that some kind of business like that would open up in our neighborhood. And they started the conversation just talking about this idea. I think it was Robert Putnam had come up with this term social capital, and we watched this little video that talked about that people don't have a lot of social capital. So in impoverished neighborhoods like ours, how do we have more connections, relationships? But then the conversation also turned to the reality that we're in a loneliness epidemic. And this report from the Surgeon General was shared, and I started reading it afterwards. But the
You sent
meeting
me a link to
itself,
that. It's crazy.
it is crazy, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, in a second. But what happened there was I saw people from just a diverse group of people, socioeconomically, culturally, ethnically, racially, and we're all in this room, and we're all affirming that, yeah, everyone's lonely. It's like we're all alone together in the same room, or in the same city, or on the same bus, or same train. And there was this desire to do something about it, and it was thrown out to anyone to talk. What do you guys, how do you guys address this, or what do you think? And there were some ideas, and I just shared that what we've been doing for years with the table is set up tables of belonging for people to experience stories of Jesus, but also have interactions with other humans,
Yeah.
and sit knee to knee, shoulder to shoulder, share a meal. And people were like, "You do that? That's amazing." And I said, "Yeah, we do." And they said, "Would you do one here in this space?" And I said, "I think we could try to do that. That sounds great." So we were invited in because of an actual need that everyone was addressing. And for once
And
in
by the
my
way,
life,
sorry to cut you
yeah,
off.
go
By
ahead.
the way, that's not a room full of like pastors trying to figure out how to
Exactly.
bump up their Sunday. These are all community leaders from all kinds of folds and crevices and cracks in the neighborhood. And they're coming together because they love their people, they love their families, they love the neighborhood, and they want to see people healthy and happy and
Yes.
fulfilled.
Yes. Yeah, and I thought it's really interesting to be in a space where the church has answers to the problems. Now, I think we know that in some ways, but to experience it in real time recently was just so encouraging, and that people are thinking like we need to get around tables. We need to have conversations. We need to know our neighbors. We need to bump up our social capital, but more than anything, we need to address loneliness. And we just said, loneliness isn't our primary target here. We're looking to make disciples. I didn't necessarily tell them all of this, but I think that
Yeah.
loneliness overlaps with a need that the gospel has answers for.
Yeah, absolutely it does. Absolutely does. And that's a human heart condition. And it's
Yes.
always existed, of course, but there again, let's just go back for a moment, a scary moment to that report, which was like years of
Yes.
work for the Surgeon General of the United States comes out with about this, what they called an epidemic of loneliness and isolation. Now, what's crazy, and you told me this, was the last time the Surgeon General put out a ginormous report like this, like
Yes.
red alert, was about what?
It's about cigarette smoking. See?
Yeah. Like that's
Yeah.
like they're, and we're older guys, and so we can remember when everybody in the world smoked, and they used to say, "Oh, it's
Yes.
good for your health,"
Yeah.
and then they started going, "No, I don't think so." And then the Surgeon General came out with, I don't know what, 60s or 70s, going, "No, it's killing everybody, and we can't
Yeah.
afford this as a nation. This is killing everybody." And so
Yeah.
they come out with this crazy report, and it's got, oh my goodness, it's the Surgeon General's advisory on the healing effects of social connection and community.
Yeah.
Just let that sink in. Let me say that again. The U.S. Surgeon General's advisory on the healing effects of social connection and community. Now, that, of course, for us just rings the bell because we've been, as church planters and pastors and missionaries, we've been singing that song from
Yes.
way back when, and not just Sunday morning for an hour or two. We're saying, no, 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 this is how life works, how God's created us to be, what the church really looked like in, first century. And so we're going, that's gotta be center of the whole thing. That old statement of a community living together on God's mission is the primary organizing structure of the church.
Hmm.
It's not, oh, by the way, join a small group, and that way maybe every once in a while on a Wednesday or Thursday, you'll feel like you got some friends that are connected to your church life. But
Yeah.
check this out. Here's a couple of things it said. I mean, and it's long, right? But and I'm not Mr. Statistics guy, but some of this kind of rocked me. Here's one. It says the percentage of Americans living alone has also increased decade to decade. In 1960, the single person households accounted for only 13% of all US households. In 1922, that number had more than doubled to 29% of all households. Okay, so that's like, let's just say it's continuing north. It's 2 years later. Over 30% of households are single person.
Yeah.
I mean, that
Yeah.
alone, it breaks my heart. I'm that guy when I see somebody at a restaurant eating alone, and we
Mhm.
do this. We're like, hey, want to come on over? It's like, maybe they're fine. They don't want to, but I'm like,
Right.
oh man, alone like that? It's everything. Every dinner's family dinner to us. So it's like, come on, man.
Right.
But is that crazy?
Yeah. Yeah. When you think about, there's obviously a lot of different contributing factors to that for sure. But when you just think about the simplicity of, there could be days, there are people that I've interacted with that say I could go days without ever hearing someone say my name, like
Uh,
even being recognized as being existent. So like singleness isn't necessarily the problem here, right? But being alone is, and
Right.
not having social connections, and the many different reasons why it's so alarming that the Surgeon General said, we got to get this out there and we got to do something about it.
Here's another stat. Only 16% of Americans reported they felt very attached to their local community.
Oof.
That's a really low number for where jump back
Yes.
X amount of years ago, and everybody was part of their neighborhood, part of the community. They were part of civic organizations. They were pulling the rope together, helping kids, helping the elderly, helping each other. But, barn raising. I know that's a long time ago, but you know what I'm
Still
saying?
happens.
To say so only 16% feel like very attached to their community. And I'm not going to go much deeper, but check this one out. This was stark, and they made a huge graph of this. Folks can't see it, but you can Google this real easy. You'll find this report. It says, lacking social connection is as dangerous as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day.
That is shocking. I mean, alarming, but
And then,
shocking too.
and then they added to the list, or lacking social connection is as dangerous as drinking 6 alcoholic beverages daily. So imagine people who are drinking 6 drinks every day, and the people who live in isolation. It's the same as far as on their just
Oof.
how it tears them apart. And it's just as bad as obesity and air pollution and all the other things that people get freaked out about. Can you believe that? And this is a heavy duty study,
Yeah. I mean, if we saw someone that was drinking 15 cigarettes a day and was
Wait,
like in the
drinking 15
workplace.
cigarettes a
I'm
day?
sorry. Yeah, drinking. That's not. I'm conflating both
You
of those
drink your
statistics.
cigarettes. There's a problem.
That's really bad. I think that's worse than loneliness. If they're drinking 6 drinks a day or having 15 cigarettes, you might, out of concern, say something or befriend them, maybe.
Put an arm
But
around them a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, but you don't know if someone's lonely, because if they're in isolation, you might not even have proximity to them. They might not put themselves in those situations, or but it's just as devastating to their life and health, their wellness. And
Yeah.
I just think that's tragic in so many ways, because it can go unseen, and it does.
It does. And so now in all their wisdom, the U.S. Surgeon General, they go, okay, so now here's like 100, here's 40 pages on what we
Yeah.
could do about it. Here's pillar 6. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Cultivate a culture of connection. It says a culture of connection is vital to creating the changes needed in our society. While formal programs and policies can be, in fact, impactful, the informal practices of, here it is, I didn't make it up, everyday life significantly influence social connection. And it goes on and on and on. And then
Yeah.
it gets into a big list of what community-based organizations can do. So go, okay, this will speak directly to the church. And it says community-based organizations include, but aren't limited to, membership-based organizations. So like a club, you'd join, civic groups, arts and education groups, faith-based organizations, service providers, youth-led organizations. It goes on and on and on. And they're saying, create opportunities and spaces for inclusive social connection. That's what you guys can start doing. So it's not just handing out food. It's not just having basketball, nights. It's not just working on this, this art thing, and we're going to have art walk, or all those things are great. But it's like create opportunities and spaces, predictable patterns for inclusive social connection, right? And foster positive, safe relationships among individuals, and this is key, it's of different ages, backgrounds, viewpoints, and life experiences. So it's not just gather up a bunch of people who are exactly the same as each other,
Right.
They need this. They need this social interaction. How we get along. Think about the division right now, just politically. That's just one little
Mhm.
divide.
Mhm.
Crazy. Oh my
Mhm.
gosh. And
Mhm.
anybody who's got a slightly different viewpoint on something, and like real sugar, not cane sugar, not in the sweet and low, don't use it. Whatever, they're
Mhm.
freaking out on
Right.
each other.
Right.
Meat, no meat, vegan, don't. It's like they say,
Yes.
no, we need connection, but we need the diversity of it, and you need to feel safe to be yourself, to be that way. It's okay.
Yes.
But we really, really need it. And so obviously we're all high fiving that, right?
Right. Right.
Oh,
I think that this just like where the rubber meets the road if you have any kind of theological leanings to think about the hospitality of God. The hospitality of God in demonstrating love and welcome to people who are on the outside, who are lonely, maybe even didn't know it, didn't once weren't a people, and now you are a people. And it's demonstrated in the person of Jesus, who literally takes on flesh, moves into the neighborhood to demonstrate what God is like, because we can't just take his word for it. We've got to see it, And that's okay in a sense. But God does that, and he eats with people. He welcomes them, and he gets, just like you said, see, he gets the polarized factions together, not only in his own group of people, but at every table it seems like he goes to throughout the Gospel of Luke.
yeah.
And then I'll skip forward a little bit. I think many of your listeners are going to know the story, but we are those who have received the hospitality of God, the welcome of God, and we are the extension of the hospitality of God, the welcome of God to people. We're perfectly positioned in so many ways to simply be the church and meet a need that the cultures around us are crying out, hey, we don't know what to do with this.
Yeah, exactly. And there again, like coming straight out of that report, they're not saying, hey, here's what people need. And it's all this programmatic stuff.
Yes.
It's places of people. And we say, well, a
Yes.
church is a place. Yes, it is. How diverse is it? And how much talking, how much inclusion, how much discussing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is it embedded in the rhythms of your local, where I walk and hang out and go, and I don't have to drive somewhere because I don't even have a car, or yeah, you know what I
Mm,
mean? And it's like, well,
yeah.
who doesn't have a car? Listen, my own sister, you know what I mean? Where she
Yeah.
lives back where we're from, like and half the time she doesn't have one, And
Yeah.
so I was just working out a ride to the airport for her yesterday, and
Yeah.
she lives in Chicago area, like, but I live in
Yeah.
Seattle. And it's like, oh my God, and so yeah, I mean I love this, and what's ringing in the back of my noggin is sometimes, you've heard this, I know you have. Christians will say, well, we really care and we give to everything. We just don't know what we could do locally. I mean, I don't
Right.
know. There's not that much need around us.
Oof.
Okay. So, well, like, like where I live, you've, like we were just talking about, you've visited.
Yeah.
There's no homeless people hanging around my neighborhood.
Right.
There's just not. Now, in the
Right.
city that I live in, sure, Tacoma next door, where we lived in for years and years and years. Yeah, there's a lot more. However, even if you don't, those stats, that loneliness, that
Yeah.
isolation, that's everywhere. And I'll tell you a quick little story. There's a guy that lives kitty corner from us across the street who's very, very elderly. And he started dropping us messages on Facebook. And then he got Tina's phone number somehow, because she's on the HOA board, and
Hmm.
started texting her random stuff. And he's very, very old. And we could tell the very definition of the term leaning in. This guy's
Yeah.
looking for an invite over. And
Yes.
so we invite him over for dinner. And I don't know how many weeks ago we finally had him over. And he brought over all this stuff, and he told us all his stories. And he does have another old buck living in his house that's like 4,000 square foot or whatever,
Mhm.
but he's very, very, very alone. And it's right here in this
Mm.
neighborhood, full of people,
Yeah.
full of kids. And I'm looking out my window right now in my office at my neighborhood, and I can think, oh, those people aren't married. That's a single guy, and he's got a room. This is something that everybody listening to this could say, I could help. Now, is
Yeah.
everybody going to like go out and rent a space and do some of the things that you guys do?
Right.
Probably not, but they could,
Mm.
they get
Hmm.
to.
They
But
sure could.
real quick, tell us just a little bit about, so you're in this neighborhood now. Let's going to jump back
Yeah.
to the beginning of the story. And all
Yeah.
these leaders are talking about this, and you tell them a little bit about what's going on with Brunch Church, and they go,
Hmm.
hey, could we get one of those here in this
Yeah.
working space? Like, and you're
Yeah.
looking around going, I bet we could. Tell us a little bit more about the rest of the story, and even what that specifically looks like for folks. Like, what do you guys do?
Yeah.
So And did that
Yeah.
get started yet?
It'll get started in about 3 weeks. We took a month just to kind of pray and discern as a community to say like, hey, this is an opportunity for us. And we did a lot more of these pre-COVID. Coming out of COVID, we have had harder time getting space
Yeah.
in places that is the right space for this. So this was an opportunity, and we didn't want to just jump at it because it's an opportunity. Also, there's financial costs, and we're a smaller church, so to do that, we have to discern these things. But it looked like finding, do they have a space that would work? And they do. And so
What
when
do you need a
our
space to look like, for instance?
yeah, that's a great question. So we like the idea of having room for about up to 30 to 40 people. I find that more than that, and it becomes harder to have conversations, any kind of joint conversation
Yeah.
or even individual conversations that go deep. So we usually want like one big set of like long 8 foot tables, together, do it that way, or we'll do circular tables with 8 people and a couple of those, a few of those. And then we usually just we'll do some of the practices of the church. We might share some songs. We'll pray over the meal. We provide the food, and then if people come, they all want to participate. That's just what we found every time, regardless of where they are. People living in transitional housing situations, coming out of addiction, or people that are like here for university, or their career or whatever. Like a whole diverse group of people. Everyone wants to bring something once they feel like they're a part of it, and they get to. We
Yep.
make that available. We just kind of um, you know, seed the offering a little bit by making sure there's going to be something there. And then,
And that's a key
yeah,
point, though. Sorry
yeah,
to jump in on you there,
no,
Gino.
do it.
It's a key point because as people are hearing this, they're like, okay, so what's that cost to feed 40 people?
Yeah,
Hey, listen, you're
yeah,
seeding it at the beginning, but eventually a community, a family starts to want to, and they will help out. We've seen that over
yeah,
and over and over in missional community life, right? I know you have too.
yeah,
Hey, there's a little
yes,
bit of you got to get that ball sort of started.
yeah,
And some people, the way they were raised or just the way they are, like anytime anybody says, "Hey, yeah, we'll come over," I guess. Like, what can we bring? Like, don't bring anything. You just come. It's like we always say, don't do that.
not
Like,
good.
let people. They want to contribute. They want to be a
Yes,
part of things. So,
yes. I mean, we're known for our family. We make quiche. We make about 4 or 5 quiche every time. All six of Team C here knows how to do that. We have an assembly line. It doesn't cost us a lot of money, but we know that in a quiche you're going to have most of the things to have a decent breakfast, and you're going to be okay. And
yeah,
we'll
yeah.
provide coffee. And then the rest of the people, we encourage them to participate in some way. And then those who are initially our guests, they catch on. It's part of all of our discipleship. It's an opportunity to disciple the Christians, the not yet believers, into how to be a solid community that cares for one another.
So let's just say we're a few months into this. Folks are
Yeah.
starting to bring stuff. They're starting, the guard's coming down a little bit.
Yep.
This is another thing I bet starts happening. People who dig it are starting to bring a friend, because
Yes.
they're
Yeah.
like they're sharing
Yeah.
the good news. And this is like a bright spot in their world. And this isn't the only thing you guys do. This is
Right.
a part of the rhythms of your church's life. I know that. It's not like,
Yes.
hey, check the box. They came, you know. So
For sure.
just because I know people are probably wondering what's the spiritual componentry feel like,
Yeah.
sound like, taste like in something like that? Because that's pretty different than I came to a church building with a steeple and a cross on top, and someone
Yeah.
handed me, a program, and I sat in rows, and the organ was going. What's the spiritual
Yeah.
componentry? And I think it's all spiritual. So don't, my heart.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I think that's good. We've done different things in different contexts, and because we never want it to feel like it was just, oh, we got the Jesus statement into the meeting. We said a couple words about Jesus, and therefore we're good. Everyone can go
Covered.
home and be blessed.
Got it
Which
covered.
that might be effective. I just think our aim for this is relationship. So we're going to have conversations about Jesus, about the scriptures, or about what it looks like to follow Jesus and in community relationally. So there might be someone who will start a conversation, read a portion of a gospel, and then we'll have questions that are not yes or no questions. And we have we call them table hosts that kind of sit at the tables and try to get people to interact. And we've never had a problem with people interacting, because the questions are about how are you responding and reflecting to the words of Jesus? And something that I think I was a little surprised by this. I shouldn't be surprised, but I just admit that I am. That people are fine to talk about Jesus. They want to talk about Jesus. They don't want to talk about church because church is a loaded word. And I'm not against the church. The church is the hope of the world as far as I'm concerned. But
We're church planners. Come on, man.
yeah, but culturally, that word is loaded. Jesus is intriguing. He's controversial in the best kinds of ways. And when you read a story in the Gospels, people respond. They don't just sit there and go, yeah, I have no comment. That just never happens.
My experience is exactly the same. And why would they even want to? It's as simple as something like this in our experience.
Yeah.
Hey, we think Jesus like lived the best human life ever. Like
Yes.
he really did. And
Yeah.
part of why we follow Jesus in his life is that we want to live that life, and that's God's desire. That's why Jesus came. And so as we have these meals together, we're going to be looking at Jesus' life and seeing how does it speak into our life, and what was God's design for that, and is
Mhm.
that good for us too? What do you think? And everybody's like,
Mhm.
yeah, I'd love an upgrade. And I think Jesus did have probably the best life. He's the
Exactly.
guy, right?
Yes.
Most people would not argue with that unless if they're an
Yes.
atheist or something like that. Yeah, well, I don't have the
I,
time right
I've
now. I could
I've
get
got
into
a
plenty
friend.
of yeah.
I've got a friend that has said, like, just from watching the way that our lives live, he's like, hey, I'm not really interested in Jesus, but I sure would like the benefits of knowing him and being known by him. And I mean, even that is a response, right? It's like
Yeah.
saying, I'm not sure that I believe this whole thing, but I can't deny that something happens among your community that has caused me to stop and take interest and notice. And I'm interested in talking about that. That's
Yeah.
that's a relational beginner. That's a relational
Yep.
start in there.
And unfortunately, that's where so much of the church in the last 100 years has actually stopped. It's like, hey, it's all
Yes.
about me, right? Well, that's
Yeah.
where everybody starts. It's like, oh, why am I buying a new car? Well, because it's going to serve your neighbors. Like, no, I just want to know if it'll get me to work. And my kids, like, I can buckle them all in safely, right? So, no,
That's good.
to me, that's great. That's a very honest starting place.
Yes.
It's not about
Yes. I
God's
can work
glory
with that.
yet, but that's most of the church yet, unfortunately. So,
True. And so we will, so like for just a view of what this looks like, that meal and that conversation will then be wrapped up with, we usually do a toast, which is kind of like a nod to the Eucharist, to communion, of kind of like just making a toast that all of us are here for whatever reason, but we celebrate that there's one that's brought us together. We think that was Jesus, and people are like, yeah, to Jesus, from wherever
right.
they are. And the effect that we've seen repeatedly from doing these once a month, twice a month, whatever, we find to be the good rhythm for that context, is that there are people that, as I've learned to say from you, they lean in a little bit more. They're like, this is good. I want to go deeper. And they ask questions. Like, I've literally been asked, what does it look like to follow Jesus? Like, how do you guys do that? And we talk about, well, there's other spaces that we mark out to gather and to scatter, to develop these rhythms of life together as disciples. And people want to jump into that. So
Yeah.
brunch church for us is a space in the whole grand scheme of being the church. It's not the only expression. It's one of many. We identify three, but there's many different ways that could look. We think that there's a space for those who have committed to following Jesus. There's spaces for us to be among our neighbors and friends that are kind of leaning in. And then there's just more public spaces where we're just doing whatever it is that we do in our lives, going to work and all of those things, and just building relationships there. And so when we inhabit those spaces with gospel intentionality, we find that people want to participate and
Yeah.
follow in learning those same spaces with the same intentionality.
It's beautiful. It's simple. And I know maybe that sounds scary to folks like, oh, put on something like that. I don't know
Yeah.
who would come. No one will talk. It's like, it really, can we loan you some faith?
Yeah, really.
It's an epidemic of loneliness and
Yes.
isolation right now. And
Yeah.
I love too that there's a freedom in your heart. And I know you guys, you and Jill, very, very well. There's a freedom in your heart to say, oh, it's got to be every week. It's got to be like, you're not clown carring this thing. And then people who
Yeah.
listen to the podcast know what I mean by the clown car is, you have ever been to a circus? The little car shows up in the center ring. It's really
Yes.
dinky. A horn comes, and it's like this this clown folds out of it, and you're like, how did he fit in there? Oh, just wait, another guy folds out. By the end of it, there was 12 clowns in there. How did they
Right.
get that all jammed in there? And the church has
Yeah.
spent decades jamming all of our spiritual life into an hour and a half. I call it the clown car experience.
It's
And
good.
you're saying no, this is a rhythm of our family, of our
Yeah.
community, and people then who lean in and get interested, well, they're coming over for dinners, or we go like, hey, we're going to be doing a book study on this. We're getting into the Bible
Yep.
over here. Hey, there's a
Yep.
serving opportunity. Oh, I care about that. Well, come serve with us. There's all those things add up to a life in Christ. When they say, hey, I want what does it look like to follow Jesus? It's not just sit in a circle and look at at the Bible that Jesus never saw once in his life. It's not
Right.
just that once a week,
Yeah.
right? So I love
Yes.
that you guys have that freedom, and maybe we do it monthly, maybe we do it every other week. It's just, what's the community vibe right now? What's it need?
Yeah.
What serves? Man, that's
Yeah.
so good, brother. That's so good.
Yeah, it's really helpful because also, just relationally, if we're talking about how this interacts with people's experience of loneliness, and we're seeing discipleship as relationship, then people are going to take different time in what they want to lean into. I think discipleship happens at the speed of relationship. I've heard you say that, and I've said it a
Yeah.
lot of times, not always citing you. So I want to properly cite you as the source of that quote. But I think that what happens is that people can come to a once a month brunch church for many months sometimes because that's relationally what they're comfortable with. It doesn't mean that they're not interested. It might be a very big step out of their isolation and loneliness
Yeah.
to do that. And
Yeah.
and we don't know that. So we don't try to fast track everyone into the kingdom. It doesn't work that way. It has to go through the speed of relationship. So we have multiple opportunities for people to dig into relationship with us and with Jesus. And in some ways they have to figure out the pace for that on-ramp that they're going to go on that on-ramp.
Well, I want to do something we've never done before here on the Everyday Disciple podcast. Is I want to invite people to help you guys really there in
Mm,
Philly set more tables, set more
mm.
spaces at the table. So this new brunch church in this co-working space that you guys are going to be starting in a few weeks. Is that in Germantown?
Yeah, it's in the Germantown neighborhood of
Yeah.
Northwest
Okay.
Philly.
I
Yeah.
mean, that if you live anywhere near there, you'll know what that is. I don't know. I haven't specifically been to that thing, but I want to invite our listeners to participate in this because you told me, you said, see, it's only like $500 a month to
Yeah.
cover all of the startup and kind of ongoing seeding of that and cover sort of
Yeah.
some of the expenses for the space and table and chairs and all that stuff. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wow. And really, that is, and I know what that's going to lead to. I know all the other things that's going to jump
Sure.
into, and like basically a new
Sure.
church plant's going to spring out of this. I want to
Yes.
invite our listeners to help us do that. I
Mm.
want to invite them to help us hit that 500 number. I don't know. Maybe there's people listening and say, I would give towards that. And maybe they're thinking, I want to start one. Well, listen, then contact Gino at
Yes,
the table
please do.
Philly. You'll find him.
Yeah.
I'll put his information in the show notes on our site. But in the meantime, would you help us hit that 500 mark? Tina and I are giving to the Table Network, and we want to see more and more and more of these do this as
Yeah.
well. But I want to invite you to that. If you've got $5 or $10, great. Some of you might say, oh, I think we could give more than that. There might be someone listening that says, I could cover that 500 a month, for like the
Yeah.
first year, as long as I can do it monthly. I don't know. We're not, we don't do this. So I'm not pushing hard. It's not, but wait, there's
Right.
more, I'm not doing that. But I do want to invite you to do that. Tell us a little bit of what that might look like, Gino.
Yeah, I mean, that's just really gracious of you, brother, to just put that ask out there, and for your audience to consider that. Like we're really serious about wanting to address this issue of loneliness, but more with the intention of seeing new relationships with Jesus occur. And so if
Yeah.
this is an opportunity,
Amen.
we'll take advantage of it. This idea came not because we said, oh, there's a loneliness epidemic. I want to be clear, right? And we need to fix loneliness. It came from us listening to neighbors and saying, how do they build relationships with people so that they might come to know Jesus? And brunch church was what developed missiologically, if you will, rather than just like, hey, here's another pain point that we can try to come up with a program for. And so we would love to see brunch church as something we kind of stumbled into and seeing as effective for church to build relationships. We'd love to see that all over the country, all over the world. People, I'm happy to help people if that would be of help to say, like, here's what we do. It's really simple, but there are real costs to it. And we get those seem to be for us. Oftentimes the stumbling block is that we can't get into the right space because we don't have the money. So any help will help us make this a sustainable time for people to come in, check out Jesus, and learn about what he's doing in the world.
I'm just breaking this down a little bit in my head. If 20 of us could give 25 a month for the next 12 months, let's say, that would cover that there it is. That's $500. That's 6,000 for the year, right? 20 folks. Now we got thousands of people listening to this podcast. If 20 all at least could say, I'll do $25 for a year, like a month, I don't know. I'm not pushing it, but I'm inviting. Okay. We put a little special link to make this easy to be able to do this. If you go to everydaydisciple.com/tables, everydaydisciple.com/tables, plural, that'll take you right to the giving page for the Table Network Philly, but it'll specifically to be able to give to the starting of this new brunch church in Germantown. Wouldn't it be cool? And I will have Gino back on. If we hit this, I'll have him back on and we're going to celebrate. It'll be like a special episode and we're going to celebrate. Like it's covered. Like, so there's no stress for that. Like just go and love people, invite them to a place at Dad's table. We say that on the show. Like it's, when we're his kids, when we're his family, and we open up more spaces to table, it's like God himself is setting the table. So help us set the table here in Germantown. I would love to hear this. I would love this. The podcast is free. Some of you have been listening for the whole 7 years. Like I'm not asking you to send me cash, but let's help set the table for more and more people to be able to know Jesus and walk with him and get set free. Oh, I'd love it.
Yeah. Right. I'd love to be able to tell people the stories. I mean, and I'll come back regardless because we're doing this. We're committed to it. We're trusting God in this, and we'd love for people's partnership and support. We want to come back and tell you more stories because we got lots of them from the past, but we want some new ones.
Here's the new ones. They're coming. And you get to be a part of that, listeners. Okay, real quick, Gino, because we've run a little bit long. I get excited and I start going. Let's wrap up with the big three, which is our big three takeaways from every episode. We always do that. And then we print those up, put them on a PDF. You can get a printable PDF of the big three for this week or really any week, any episode of the show by going to everydaydisciple.com/big3, BIG3. Gino, real quick, let's just talk through them. I kind of like to outline these in my own mind, like head, heart, hands. What do we want people to like know and take away? Like the big summary of this, what do they need to know and remember?
I think they need to know that there is this intersection for the church in our time right now with society, and that is around this epidemic of loneliness. Like understand that, let that seep into our heads that this is a significant issue, that something that is akin to the smoking epidemic that we've put out reports and said, this is not good for you. Society is saying that being alone is not good for you.
And I'd say, and that issue, significant issue, is providing for us as the church, as God's family here, a significant opportunity. Let's not miss it.
Yeah.
Let's not miss it. Okay, number two, what do we want people to believe in their hearts about this issue?
Man, I want everyone, regardless of if it's the isolation and loneliness issue or anything, I want us to know how dearly loved we are by God, and that the welcome of God actually is our invitation to welcome others as well. Not because we have to or it's some duty, but we actually get to because we have everything that we need in Jesus.
Amen to that. I have nothing to add. Oh, I'll take number three myself. That's the hands one. And there again, the hands, like, how do I get started? If you want to start something like this brunch church, this has been encouraging to you, and you go like, I know this is true. This is an opportunity. God's moving my heart. Go ahead, go to the show notes. Gino will help you. But in the meantime, too, because most of you probably aren't just going to start that up like next week or next month and all, I want to invite you to help set the table there in Germantown. Let's get this knocked out. Let's get this $500 a month covered for them. Again, all you have to do is go to everydaydisciple.com/tables. And you can either make a one-time donation or you can make a monthly donation. And it's not for the rest of your life, but as long as you want to. And then you're going to be connected to that, and Gino will send you updates too. So you'll see how that's going, and you can even go visit or whatever you want. So that's sort of the takeaway I want you to leave with is you can be a part of this. and start to not only chip away at the epidemic of loneliness and isolation, but you could be directly involved in setting the table there in Germantown with Gino and a whole bunch of other missionaries living like the family of God out serving people. So again, just go to everydaydisciple.com/tables for that. And boy, I can't wait for the episode where we get to tell how that went and update everybody on what's going on there, man.
Yeah, me too, brother.
All right. Well, thanks again for being on. I love talking to you. And the hardest thing is getting these episodes to not be like just hours and hours, because you and I can talk and talk. And
I feel that.
and you're a heck of a reader, so you're always full, man. Your tank is full of thoughts and ideas and all this, and so am I.
True.
And we're both talkers, and so I love you, brother. Thanks so much
Love
for
you
being
too.
on. Hey, I hope you all join us next week on the Everyday Disciple podcast. We do it every Monday. Just check your feed. Go ahead and subscribe to that so you don't lose it. And it'll just come right in. It'll remind you and it'll fill you right up. I hope you'll join us. We're going to continue to talk about a lifestyle of discipleship and mission that just kind of fits into everyday life. All right. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for joining us today. For more information on this show and to get loads of free discipleship resources, visit everydaydisciple.com. And remember, you really can live with the spiritual freedom and relational peace that Jesus promised every day.